Hello guys, welcome back to another episode of Analog Dinosaur. Today we're going to continue my composition series, and what I wanted to talk to you about today is geometry. So geometry is also one of my favorite ways that I'm using to compose my photograph. So what is geometry? Basically here we're talking about circles, squares and triangles, okay? So what these do to your frame is they create a lot of order, and really actually your eye subconsciously it's looking for geometry. So whenever you're looking at a frame, say this frame that's behind me, you can see the triangles, and when I'm looking at a photo I'm going to find those and I'm going to think it's a pleasing image. So as soon as you learn to harness the power of geometry in your photography, you'll get to make more pleasing frames. So let's get right into it. So basically you have two forms of geometry. You have geometry that's real, for example a real square, and you have geometry that's perceived, where your eye actually makes a connection between lines and creates the shape on its own. So let's first talk about squares and rectangles. So by definition, squares and rectangles have sharp edges, okay? And they're made up of straight lines, so horizontal lines and vertical lines. And what this does is, you've heard of the expression thinking inside the box. So they create a sensation of order in your image. And they are actually, by association, masculine, is where actually mostly squares and rectangles are in man-made structure. They're very hard to find in nature. So let's check out an example of the use of rectangles.
So here in this case, in front of you, you got a photo by Henri Cartier-Bresson, one of the most famous photographers of the 20th century. So when we start looking at this frame, obviously it's full of rectangles. So first of all, you see this main rectangle here is what's giving the basic structure to the frame. Within this rectangle, everything that's happening is included. And we have, of course, these little rectangles here, the window frames, which all of them create also structure and order inside the frame. And the way this is composed is that the rectangles kind of contain the action. Now, here's a photo by Benoit Paillet, who is actually one of my favorite photographers as well, Canadian photographer. And in this case, he's using the square as actually just the main subject inside the composition. So really it's just a piece of wood. And then you got this square, which is kind of illuminating the whole surrounding scene. And really that's all there is to it. It's an extremely simple frame, but it's an example of how when you simplify your composition, you can really intensely direct your viewer's attention.
Now let's talk about circles and ovals. So circles and ovals are very interesting because actually they are lines that never end. So in this case, they used to evoke infinity, completion, and the idea of cycles. You know, circle is a line that comes back to the beginning and continues going over and over again. So really, it's an extremely efficient way of capturing your viewer's eye and keeping it there. So now let's check out some example of circles in some photos.
Now let's look at a photo by a photographer called Dirty Harry on Flickr. He's actually a member of Burn My Eye collective, a very, very cool collective of great photographers. So this is an example of actually implied circles. So he's got these geese in the photo, and you can see actually kind of a funny photo, the way he's framed it. The geese themselves form circles in this way. So immediately our eye is drawn to these birds. And also, obviously, you can see that the way the heads work also are composed as circles. So kind of an intriguing photo right here.
And lastly, what I wanted to talk to you about today is the use of triangles. So we touched up on that a little bit in the video about diagonals. But really what a triangle is when you have 3 points that are linked by lines, okay? So usually in a triangle, you'll have the highest point, which is called the apex. And the 2 other points, which I don't know what they're called, but anyway, you have a couple of choices in triangles. Either you're gonna have 1 horizontal line and 2 diagonal lines, which complement it. And in this case, the triangle is much more harmonious. Or you might have a tilted triangle with only 3 diagonal lines, which also works as well, but creates a feeling of more unsteadiness, unstableness. And really a triangle is an extremely useful way, as actually all geometry is, of creating a relation between different points in your image. And this is especially cool when you have, for example, say, heads of 3 characters in your photo. Your eye will subconsciously create the lines that don't exist. So let's check out an example of the use of triangles.
Now let's look at triangles. So this is actually a photo by me that I shot in Albania on a shoot, and what you can see here is actually it's an implied triangle. So although there's no formal triangle, your eye kind of, when you're looking at this frame, goes from here to here to here, and it kind of makes up its own triangle, these goats which are on the road. And really also there's not much else to the frame except this triangle, but the way that these subjects are composed, you can actually, it makes it a much more pleasing frame to look at. Here is a very cool photo by André Kertész, a very famous French-Hungarian photographer. So obviously here you can see the whole frame is really made up of different triangles. So you got, for example, you got one here, you got another one here, and obviously one that's coming here, and also a smaller triangle here. So actually the way this works is that this triangle right here is used to frame the subject of the photo, who's the woman with the dog. And the way that this roof here works and this kind of piece of garden is that it's adding depth. So each layer of the photo is a triangle. So, and of course, as you have a lot of diagonal lines, it makes it also a very dynamic photo to look at.
There you have it, my dear audience. This completes my video on geometry in photography. So I hope you enjoyed it. Click like or subscribe or comment if you want. And I hope you go out and find some great geometry in your photos. Enjoy your photography, take some great photos, and have a great evening. Bye, bye, bye.